Now, Israel's recent, or I should say continuous air campaign targeting Iran's nuclear and military sites has escalated tensions to a dangerous peak. With top Iranian military leaders killed and promises of harsh retaliation, the region faces an uncertain and potentially devastating conflict. This evening, we speak to Mariam Jooma Carikci from the Media Review Network about the implication and what may come next. Sister Mariam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the show.
Walaikum salam. Jazakallah for having me.
It's a pleasure. So tell us, what do these strikes reveal about Israel's core objective? Are they aiming to dismantle Iran's nuclear program, reshape regional power, or send a deterrent warning?
Look, before we say anything further than that, I think we need to just make 100% clear that our listeners understand that what's happened is absolutely a contravention, a violation of international law. So essentially, Israel has attacked first. The United Nations Security Council did not authorize it, and which basically means it did not meet the basic requirement under the UN Charter with regard to attacking in the case of a preemptive attack. So it is definitely not preemptive. It is not defensive. It is essentially just Benjamin Netanyahu trying to deflect the attention from exactly what he is doing at the moment, which is genocide. So beyond this military rationale, I think, we need to look at the domestic politics of Iran and the domestic politics of Israel. And essentially what we see is both regimes are under enormous pressure, but of course the Israelis are now using this as a way of shifting the narrative. And so we're looking at the Gazan atrocities basically moving from where Israel is the oppressor to now putting Iran, as shaping Iran as the threat. So no longer will Netanyahu be deemed to be seen as the violator of human rights, but he's actually supposed to be defending national security in Israeli terms. So we're moving from war crimes to national security, from an internal crisis to an external form of unity. And of course, we know that this is always the playbook.
Yes. Earlier on, I was saying to Ziad, my engineer, that one of the things he mentioned was that he was protecting Israel and its neighbors, and that sounded very sinister to me.
Absolutely. I mean, you will understand that, the Abraham Accords have been also under pressure, and Netanyahu desperately wants to maintain Saudi's support for the Abraham Accords. And if we look at how it's been interacting even with North Africa, look at Morocco and the recent almost normalization by 3 permanent security members, France, the UK and the US, of Moroccan occupation over the Western Sahara, essentially means that, there's a overt and blatant acceptance of Moroccan occupation as well as Israeli occupation of Palestine. And if you look at the relations between Morocco and Israel, they're just deepening on all levels. So you have states such as those that are, highly Zionist in nature, despite their Muslim-sounding names. And then you have, kind of almost the alternatives, where you have states like Qatar and Turkey, and of course, the BRICS countries that are being put up as alternatives to the Western hegemony. And so what we're seeing now is an attempt by Netanyahu to basically say to, the Gulf states that, look, these people are just as dangerous to you as they are to me. And so if we stand in this thing together, we will be saving all of us. And I made this point earlier this morning to say that I strongly believe that, the Gaza genocide, despite the extreme pain and extreme sacrificial nature of it, might be a ray of hope for the Ummah, in that it could trigger the second rise or the second Arab Spring. And I would say hopefully an Ummah Spring, where it's not confined just to the Arab states, but where we are seeing a return to civilian power, a return to the ethos of justice, and where essentially we say for finality that we are fed up with authoritarianism, we are fed up with monarchies, we are fed up with the imposition of governments against the wishes of the people.
How do, the military actions impact the already stalled nuclear talks between Iran and the US? Is there any hope left for diplomacy?
I think this is a critical question because we're all waiting to see what Iran's going to do next, right? So this is kind of the litmus test. Will it really live up to its rhetoric, or will it end up being a paper tiger, as Israel has said it is? And that, analysts from a broad range of institutions have said the same thing, that this really is the crucial moment, almost an existential moment for Iran itself. So when we look at the nuclear talks, one might argue that this is actually a form of extracting concessions, the US's form of extracting concessions from Iran,
yes.
To say that it would bear down now on Israel more firmly in exchange for its, promise not to enrich its uranium. But I think, it goes down a little bit deeper in the sense that the Iranian nuclear talks have always been, almost. I'm trying to think how to put it. It's almost been the theater, and behind it is actually the geopolitics of projecting power. So Iran has lost a lot of status, particularly after the decimation of the Assad regime, right? And then obviously its proxies like Hezbollah have also been significantly weakened. And so this might almost be an opportunity for Iran to reinvent itself. And that might sound contradictory because you'd say that they're under attack. But if the internal dynamic, which is the dynamic between, or the push and pull tension between the IGRC, which is the Revolutionary Guards, and those who are from the National Army, because they represent two power centers. One is the defender of the revolution, and the other is the defender of the state. And so it's state versus proxy almost. And if we see that there's, the weaknesses are more apparent and more prominent, you might find that there would actually be a way in which Iran could reinvent itself to be a democratic Iranian regime almost, and in that way attempt to influence the region again. Because at this moment it's highly isolated. A point I made earlier is that, in the India-Pakistan war, Iran said nothing. It didn't offer support to Pakistan. It didn't condemn India either. And yet it shares a border with Pakistan. So we have to look at some of these things.
Interesting that you say that, because earlier on today, Trump actually said, if you give into certain things, you may actually be a better country. He kind of gave them an opportunity, as you said, to reinvent themselves. But they need to look at that very strategically there.
Yes, absolutely. I think the thing is, unfortunately, as Muslims and as people outside of the region, we desperately want to believe in the morals and the ideological underpinnings of state actors and their motives. And I think, unfortunately, it doesn't always come down to that. It comes to self-interest, preservation of the regime. And what Iran faces right now is literally a threat to its regime. So it needs to find a way in which it can remain, cohesive without obviously completely throwing off its revolutionary cloak, with pun intended, but to almost present itself as an actor that's capable and willing to cooperate on a regional level. And you have to understand that Turkey offers a really substantive threat in the sense of competition to Iran. You look at the influence that Turkey has over Syria, over Iraq,
yes.
Particularly actually almost one would say neutralizing the impact of Iran in Iraq now in northern areas. So, and now with the Kurdish also, with the PKK having given up their arms, you're looking at a place where there's almost, one could say there's a regional cohesiveness from the Turkish side. And it is this imbalance, I think, or is this threat that Iran fears more deeply, in my view, than Israel.
And then what about the role that the US is playing behind the scenes, given also its public distancing from the attacks?
Yeah, no, this is obviously, the old trick of being completely embedded in the process and completely behind its machinations, and yet saying, no, I have no knowledge, or yes, we know, but we're not part of it. So what it does, it gives plausible deniability. It gives Trump the ability to say, it wasn't me, it's Netanyahu, if it doesn't go his way. On the other hand, if it does, he can take the credit for it. So I think essentially we all know nothing happens without the U.S.'s permission, even technically. Yes. I mean, if you look at the flights of those jets, those fighter jets, there would be absolutely no way they could fly without refueling from one of the U.S. bases in that area. So they could travel from Israel to Iran, but you would need then a refill almost. So it would definitely be from one of the U.S. bases. It's just, it's basic things that cannot function without U.S. support. But on the other hand, and we're seeing this more and more, especially with European leaders as well, like Macron, that at the moment, Benjamin Netanyahu is just the guy to blame everything on. No matter what their roles have been, in the complicity of the genocide, they can just blame it all on Netanyahu and feel that the regime change in Israel would just make it all fine. But as civil society, our job is to make sure that no one gets away with the genocide and that no one can say that they were not part of, basically blockading essentials and humanitarian aid to a starving population.
Yeah, being complicit. So considering Iran's ties with Russia and China, how might this conflict then affect global geopolitical dynamics beyond the Middle East?
So again, it comes back to the factions within Iran, because as we've said, Iran is not a monolith, right? So you have the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and then Atesh, which is the conventional army, which is more nationalistic. And so we have to see, which elements of the Iranian establishment lean towards, closer ties with China and Russia, and who is pushing for almost normalization. And like I say, it's almost like it has to be almost a symbolic balancing to avoid a full-out war. And I think Pezeshkian's got a really difficult task at the moment. But we must remember that Russia was not helpful in Syria as when it was clear that Assad was going to be deposed. Russia did not assist. So everyone, as I said, goes back to their self-interest. Alliances are only as powerful as the instruments are for helpful to those actors. And so China also has tried its best to play the role of mediator in the Middle East, and I don't think it would deviate from that. I don't think it's going to be overtly in favor of the Iranian regime. So what I would say is, at this point, it's very important to see what the domestic situation is in Iran.
All right. Sister Mariam, Jazakallah khair for shedding light on this crisis. It has such massive regional and global stakes. We'll just have to keep watching to see what happens. And I think everybody is asking the question, what is Iran going to do? So right now, they're still being attacked and nothing's come of it. Some people are saying they've lost quite a number of their military, the heads of their military. So maybe that's the reason behind it. But it could also mean the storm before, or the quiet before the storm. We don't know.
No, certainly. No, I mean, I think, again, it's a matter of we need to now know how will Iran respond. Is it going to simply have media briefings that it's been doing all day, saying that it's promising decisive action, or is there something going to happen? And if it doesn't happen, again, it's going to trigger all kinds of movements within Iran. I mean, you have to understand that the Iranian population have been living under sanctions for decades. So economically, the country is not in a position, to kind of project itself outwards. What people want is a stability in the economy. People want growth. They want jobs. And it sounds very selfish, but we know that ultimately those are the things that move the populace in any country. And if the government is unresponsive to their basic needs and yet projecting a foreign or an internationalist agenda, it's not resonating with civil society. And that's where, again, we're talking about the legitimacy deficit. How legitimate how responsive or how representative are the leaders to their people. And I think it's not only in Iran. We can apply that to basically the whole of the Middle East at this point.
At this point, yeah. Shukran for your time. Much appreciated. And inshallah, we'll keep an eye and hopefully we talk again.
Ameen. Thank you for having me. Assalamu alaikum.
You're welcome. Wa alaikum assalam.